Hi, I'm Steve. Welcome to my shop. Today is the last part in the series on sliding table saw purchase considerations, and most all of this was viewer requested, so I hope this will be helpful to you. The topic today is delivery, setup, and calibration. So the first part of this episode is going to deal with delivery and specifically shipment. Shipment, most of us, where these machines are going to be delivered by truck. And by truck, you're going to either have, if you're dealing with a smaller machine, then lift gate's probably your best option. If you're dealing with a larger machine, you're probably either going to have to rent a forklift or hire some riggers to do it. So I always hire riggers to handle large machines. And yeah, it costs money, but it's well worth it because they got the equipment. They'll pull the thing off the pallet and put it in your shop. And generally there's a minimum hourly charge, minimum number of hours and hourly charge. In my area, it's three hours minimum charge. They do charge for travel time, and it's largely based on the equipment that they have to bring. It's kind of a pain for coordinate that because you obviously want to minimize your standby time. You don't want your rigging company waiting around all day while you're paying them an hourly rate and the truck comes at the end of the day. You really want to try as best to coordinate that between the trucking company, your riggers, and yourself. But it's kind of a nuisance, but hey, for some machines, that's really the only way to go. As far as getting the machine off a pallet, obviously the forklift, if you've hired riggers or you have a forklift available, that's obviously the best way. The thing that I found to be most effective is to go to your local lumber yard or big box store or whatever and buy you a sheet of 3/4 inch CDX plywood. And generally what I'll do is I'll use that as a ramp. I'll screw a 2x4 to the pallet, and usually I'm able to salvage that material from the shipping crate that it comes in or framework around it. Basically you want to provide a ledge to screw to the pallet, and that I put a couple of screws into the 3/4 inch plywood. Now you got a ramp and you don't want it sagging in the middle, so then what I'll do is I'll take 2x or 1x stock and put them at various pieces on the underneath the ramp just to provide some support. Then I will put the pallet jack under the machine and then lift it and slide it down the ramp. And it's easy enough to do as long as you're dealing with something that's manageable. While it's preferable to have help with that, I have done this by myself on machines that weighed 1,600 pounds. So it's doable, just be careful when you do it. And that's the best way I've found to get machines off a pallet. Wherever you're buying your machine from, get the guidance on what equipment you need before that thing ever goes on a truck, because it's best for you to have all that stuff coordinated in advance before you're dealing with it and you can't get it off the truck. The other option, if you're buying a machine used and you're picking it up yourself, or you're close enough to your distributor to pick it up yourself, probably the best method, I think, for most people is a tilt bed trailer. And I picked this machine up. It was about a 3-hour drive for me when I bought this particular model. And I rented a car hauler trailer. It was open on all sides, and it had a very stout winch type arrangement on the front of it. So basically I put this machine on a pallet jack, and we just used a come along and helped the machine up onto the trailer. It was actually more difficult to get it off than it was on, but the tilt bed trailer, I'm a big believer in those. Setup and commissioning, some manufacturers, they do offer a commissioning service. Expect to pay for that. You can wait some time before they actually show up to do it. So I had that done on my first machine. I learned from the guy when he did it. Now I'm pretty much able to do that myself. So let's get to the sliding table setup. Okay, the first thing you'll need to do is get a straight edge, and this is about as straight an edge as I've got, is this woodpecker's rule. There are precision straight edges. I do not have one. One of the things you need to do, and it's useful to have a set of feeler gauges here, is you're going to want to check to get this sliding table saw in a plane parallel to the cast iron base, but with this sliding table slightly higher. Probably a nominal setting is 0.010 of an inch higher, roughly 0.25 millimeters. And you want to do this in several planes in several areas, both front and rear. And you'll adjust the jacking bolt heights to get that done, and that can be a very tedious operation. So this particular saw came assembled, so I didn't really have to adjust that at all. It was right on. What you see now is the front jacking bolt assembly, and these bolts here and on this side adjust the height of the base for the sliding table. This device here in the middle, you'll see I'll move around here and get a better view. There is a jacking screw here. Once these bolts are loosened, you can move the table left and right, and there's a set on the back side as well. And what this does is set you up to adjust the toe out. And now I'm going to cover how to check the toe out. I'm not going to adjust it, but I'll cover how to check it. Now this jacking mechanism is likely going to be different on different make saws, so just be aware of that. And basically you want this trajectory to go from basically zero at the front of the blade and just trail off ever so slightly. So you don't want it diving into the back side of the blade, you want it going slightly away. And different people have different ideas about what that measurement should be, but even the manufacturers don't publish what their setup should be. So the tool I'm going to use to do this is a one-way multi-gauge with a dial indicator. And this is the reason I like this base is cast iron. You can use it for squaring as well, use it as a square as well. But this is heavy enough that it'll stay on the table and I don't have to worry about clamping it. So the first thing I'm going to do is set this up to where the dial indicator is at 0, and these things have adjustable dials here, and I'm going to set that up at the front of the blade and set it at 0. And let me move the camera here. Okay, so I've got this thing set to 0, and I'm up against the plate. And on this, I'm assuming my blade plate is flat, and it's wise to have this thing as high as you can because it'll give you a longer distance, and it would be good if it was clean, but this one isn't clean. I have no idea how this thing's going to turn out. So now I'm going to move the sliding table here to the trailing edge, and what you'll see there is I moved off of 0 and I am right at 0.002 of an inch. It's close enough to me, and I've not noticed any problems with it, so I'm just going to leave that alone. But if you need to adjust that, then you would use your jack, you would loosen your bolts, adjust your jacking screws to adjust the trajectory of your sliding table. Now I'm going to cover doing the five-sided cut method to check for square. And I did another video, I think it was on the fine tool Fine Tool Works bench dog reviews for the Festool MFT table. What I'll do is leave a link to that, because in that video I described the mathematics of the five-sided cut and why it works. But right now I think this thing's probably right on square-wise, so what I'm going to do is not knock it out of square, but I'm going to adjust the fence so that it is not square. And we'll see how that looks on the five-sided cut. Okay, so the first step in a five-sided cut is to take a piece of sheet goods, whether it's plywood, MDF, particle board, it doesn't really matter. Approximately, and what I normally shoot for is at least 2 foot by 2 foot. The larger it is, the more accurate measurement you can get. First thing I'm going to do is make it unsquare. And I'm going to adjust this fence to be slightly out of square. And I'm going to adjust this to, why don't I say 0.15 degrees off. So I am 0.15 degrees off, the fence is locked in position. So right now I am slightly out of square. Now I'm going to make a five-sided cut. And what this cut will do is I'm going to take this, first I'm going to make a straight edge, then I'm going to turn that straight edge up against the fence, make another cut, rotate it around, and I'm going to make 5 cuts. On the 5th cut, the off cut, I will measure the thickness of the off cut at the trailing edge and the leading edge to see if I'm square. If it's identical, then this thing's perfectly square. Okay, so I don't know how well the camera's picking up on this, but visually already, just being out 0.15 degrees, because this is a compounding error, it multiplies by 4 times all the way around on the 5th cut. This trailing edge is much wider than the leading edge. And I'm going to measure this with some dial calipers here. I am 27.51 millimeters on that end, and I am at 21.34. So 27.5 and 21.34. That over this length, just a small angle multiplied 4 times will come up with significant differences in the square. So it looks like on this diagonal I am 863 millimeters, and across this diagonal here, so that was 863. Here I am 865, so I am 2 millimeters out of square. So now I'm going to put this thing back into square. At least I hope so. So I've gone back to what I hope to be square, and it's been consistent in the past, so let's see how we do. And now I'm going to repeat the 5-sided cut, and the first 4 cuts should make this square. The 5th cut should put this, should give me the check of that square, and if they're the same dimension on the leading and trailing edges, it's square. So we'll do that check. This check. Here I am at 23.08 millimeters. Here at 23.08 millimeters. So I would say that is square. let's do the diagonal cross check. Here I'm at 801 millimeters and 801. So what you'll need to do is, however your adjustment is for square on your outrigger, that's how you would adjust the stop to make your outrigger fence or even standard fence square. Normally I don't do this 5-sided cut just because it's once you have confidence that your machine's square and stays that way, I just don't see much need for it unless for some reason I were to change the trajectory of the saw or check something or change something. Well, one thing I will note that you need to do this operation on both the forward fence position if you have an outrigger and the rear fence position. That way you can check square for both of them. So this concludes the series on sliding table saw purchase considerations. I hope you found this useful and informative. I know there were some suggestions of things to cover that I hadn't thought of, and I do appreciate the feedback on that. I had thought about, and I think one request was to cover blades. I think it's really not a sliding table saw purchase consideration. I'll probably make a separate video on that to discuss the various blades that I use and why I use them. So thank you for watching and have a great day.